Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to talk about a couple of things about the Nearpod lesson from Friday and about the upcoming lessons for this week. So last week, you did a few Nearpod lessons on Plessy versus Ferguson and understanding the consequences of Plessy versus Ferguson. First of all, when you are using Nearpod for classwork, please make sure that you are putting your first name and your last name. These lessons are assigned to multiple class sections, and I have students with the same names and even students with the same last initials in multiple class sections. So for example, I have more than one Chloe K. So please be using your entire given name, first and last. Don't make any nicknames for yourself. Don't just use your last initial. I can't give you credit if I don't know who it's for. So if there are multiple students with the same name and only one is completed, both students are going to not get credit if they don't put their last name. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when you're completing both the Nearpod lessons and the Edpuzzle lessons, it's recording how much you are viewing. So don't skip ahead the slides and don't skip ahead the video just to answer the questions. It's not about just answering the questions right now. It's also about participating in the learning of the lesson. So it's different than when you're in the classroom and you're just sitting there and you're learning by osmosis, right? You're just taking it in because you're in the room. If you're not actually interacting with the slides, or you're not interacting with the videos, or you're not watching the videos and you're not following the directions, then you're not actually participating in the learning activity for the class. Okay, that being said, I want to go over some of the things in this particular Nearpod lesson because some of the things it seems like we didn't fully understand. So when it asked you, what did you think the effect would be on the United States of the Supreme Court decision? Some of us wrote things like segregation would be less, people would understand how wrong it was. That's not going to be the impact of the decision of Plessy versus Ferguson. The impact of Plessy versus Ferguson is that, number one, the Supreme Court decides that they decide in the favor of the Louisiana separate train car law. And when they make this decision, they use famous language that says that in the eyes of the law, that as long as the state is providing separate but equal facilities, meaning separate but equal train cars, meaning that each race got a train car. The black citizens got a train car, the white citizens got a train car. As long as they were providing a train car for both, it didn't matter that they weren't sitting together in the same train car, right? So separate but equal, meaning that each one got one. Each race got a train car to sit in. It did not mean that it was the same train car. So this really legalizes segregation in the United States and allows for states to then create more and more and more laws that separate black citizens from white citizens, and not only black citizens, but white citizens from Mexican Americans, white citizens from Asian Americans. But primarily when we're talking about segregation and Jim Crow, we're talking about the separation of black citizens and white citizens in the United States. And it was not just in the South. It was prevalent within the entire nation. So that's the first thing that I want to make sure that we understand. The second thing I want to make sure we understand is that as more and more states pass these laws, segregation becomes in every aspect of people's lives. Like a lot of you were noticing, like barbers were segregated. Like there couldn't be a black barber serving a white citizens or white women. But buses and restrooms and waiting areas and movie theaters. I mean, this stands out to me the most here, this burial. You couldn't even be dead and be next to someone of another race, which is really telling about how people thought about each other, how people thought about members of their community that were a different race, that they did not think that they were fit to be buried in the same ground. And so when you are asking questions about, well, how is this still like happening today, or what's the impact of this today, or this, how do people think like this? This is over 150 years of people thinking and believing this way. It doesn't just go away with a Supreme Court decision. It takes years and years and years. We're not even, we're still feeling the effects of these laws and this part of our history, even now in the 21st century. Like, we're still struggling to find equal treatment for Black citizens and white citizens and citizens of people of color. Another thing I wanted to add, as we start looking at more primary sources and we watch more films and we listen to people talk from the time period of the 1950s and the 1960s, I want us to be conscious of the language that we are using when we are talking, and we're not using the language that was used in the 1940s and the 1950s. So in the films that you're going to watch and in the primary sources that you're looking at, and in readings that you're going to have, you're going to notice that some of the words used to refer to African American citizens are kind of archaic, words that we don't use anymore. So I would like you to not use them when you are writing about these topics or when you're answering questions on a Flipgrid. I would like you to not use colored people. I would like you to not use the word Negroes. Obviously, any racial slurs I would not like you to use. Those are obviously inappropriate all of the time, then and now. And when you're talking about these topics, I would like you to use words. You could use Black citizens, you could use people of color, but try to be, and you could use African Americans, but try to be mindful of how you are talking and try not to use the language of the primary sources, because the primary sources are historic and those language that we don't use anymore. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to watch a film, and the film is powerful. It's called The Murder of Emmett Till. It's about the murder of a 14-year-old boy, a lynching actually. And it takes place in Chicago and Mississippi in the United States in 1955. Now we're going to watch this film because it really gives a sense of the impact of these segregation laws. We're going to watch it a little bit out of chronological order because it takes place in 1955. And in 1954 was the Supreme Court decision that declared segregation and separate but equal to be unconstitutional. So even though that took place in 1954, this murder that takes place is really a direct consequence of the laws of the Jim Crow era that are still being enforced, obviously, in Mississippi in 1955. So this week, as you watch, it's a 50-minute documentary film with questions embedded. So you are able to watch it in one sitting or multiple sittings, but make sure that you are watching the film and answering the questions. And then there will be a reflection activity on Friday. It is a emotional film. And if you would like to check in to kind of talk about it, I will be available on Google Meets. Check Google Classroom for the times. But but it's not a class. I'm not going to lead a class on it. It's self-guided. You're going to watch the film and answer the questions and work on the reflection on your own. But if you want to check in, if you have questions, if you have things you want to talk about, I will be on Google Meets on Thursday and on Friday. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So have a good week.